Hello and welcome to the latest of our weekly astrology and spirituality shows for week commencing the 17th of January with Alyssa and Patrick. Thank you so much for joining us. This week the astrology sees some big energy. The full moon on Monday provides a backdrop of energy for the next 2 weeks. We're being asked to balance the more emotional dimension of the moon in the sign of Cancer, which of course it governs, with the more material and practical energies of the sun. But Pluto's in the mix next to the sun, and that can create quite a lot of very intense emotional reactions over this next couple of weeks, particularly if we're, for example, struggling around employment. Perhaps there's been an impact on your job because of the pandemic, and that's something that's really biting home. That's a very serious dimension to deal with. Or it could be we're lucky enough to be in a role but totally uninspired emotionally by it. Or perhaps we like our job, which is the very worldly energies of Capricorn, but it's not very well paid. So these are the things that I think that we could be grappling with over the next couple of weeks. Mercury's continuing to retrace its steps in the sign of Aquarius, but the sun moves into Aquarius on Thursday, and that gives us an opportunity, along with Saturn there, the co-ruler of Aquarius, to perhaps wake up our connections to others. In the Northern Hemisphere particularly, January can be a hunkering down month. As we're getting further into the month, perhaps we can get in contact with those people that we've not spoken to since perhaps before Christmas. So that's how I see the astrology this week. What about the Hermetic wheel? Do we have a change, or is it all the sameness as we are?
We do have a change. So the first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, we're in the Four of Pentacles. Very much about thinking about our finances, our jobs, our roles in life, maybe not wanting to shift out of our comfort zone too
Very
much.
Capricorn in a way.
Very Capricornian. But then on Wednesday, we take a shift into the more airy Five of Swords, which is very much about picking our battles wisely. We don't have to attend every argument that we're invited to. And
That's
just to think,
one.
we might get a little bit upset this week at something somebody says, but is it really worth falling out over?
The moon opposite Pluto is a very, very up and down emotion, very swift and very intense. So that can feed into that Five of Swords, and of course the Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, and it's important to just remember these things are temporary. Especially with the tarot cards, these are pip cards that we're talking about. So they're temporary things in our lives. This isn't going to be something that's going to be dragging on for a long period of time. Just got to get through this week if there are any irritations.
Okay. We've also got Uranus ending its long backward retrograde, which is good news, but it is still in that right angle with Saturn. It is actually going to start to inch apart the orb or gap between the exact square of 90 degrees. By the end of this week is actually 4 degrees, so that's really good news for us all. Also the North Node in Taurus, and of course we're going to have those 2 sets of eclipses in Taurus this year. So I think there is a reset coming financially for us all. I think we've seen signs of this, inflationary pressures. The cost of living has gone up in quite a few different ways, particularly around fuel. So that's something that I think we're going to all have to attune to. Now, in terms of the word for the week, Gillian suggested trajectory, which really got me thinking, because we haven't actually spoken about this yet, but a lot of the words we use do have a pretty direct spiritual sort of energy around them. But trajectory is something, to me, has an energy behind it. So there's some engine behind it. So it's moving. That's so I get a sense of movement. But then I was thinking, perhaps we think of trajectory very much as a sort of upward thing. But then I was thinking, well, hold on. We could feel that the trajectory, or we feel that what we're caught up in keeps us on as we are, or maybe we just feel our energy is always dipping down a little bit so that the energy is taking us in a particular direction. So I started to think, how can we change our trajectory if we don't feel it is so upward and positive? What did you get from this one?
Oh, I love what you've said there. Well, the word trajectory, apart from being a bit difficult to say,
For me,
and
Keith. They are all mine, I shall say.
I loved this because it got me thinking about times in my own life where I felt like things haven't been going in the right direction, but then that takes you somewhere else.
Wow.
And so it's kind of like you're on a train, and I've had this happen to me where I'm on a train and then the train splits in two, and I've been on the wrong section of the train and end up getting
As
lost.
It's moving along, that sounds like something
That's
from the
happened.
Keystone Cop.
Yeah, that has happened to me. And, it's quite scary when that happens because you think, oh, I'm not going to the right destination. What do I do now? And sometimes we can feel like that in life, can't we? Like, oh, where's my life taking me? It's not quite as I planned. But sometimes there is a bigger plan behind it. So
That's a brilliant point.
I
So
love that
even
one.
if it doesn't feel like it's very positive, maybe the series of experiences we have are all a bridge to something that ultimately gets there.
Yeah.
I said to Alyssa a few weeks ago, I said, why did it take me to being 60 years of age and 364 days, and we do celebrate our 3rd anniversary on Wednesday, so sharing a picture within the video. Why did it take me to 60 to get married? And she said, because you weren't ready before then. And this is the wisdom of my wife. And but I yearned for that kind of special connection. But it was up until about 6 or 7 years ago, I really was very, very happy a lot of the time with my own company. And then it did start to change. And then I really started to pray that I would meet someone who I really would, be ideally matched to. So in that sense, there was a lot of experiences, like you're saying. I was on the wrong train loads of times, but actually I was on the right track, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I had to go through those experiences of being a very independent person and then realising that I'd changed.
Yeah, I love that. And I like to think that sometimes setbacks are setups for something else, for life to take us in a new direction that we couldn't have planned. And all of those life experiences make us who we are, the difficult ones and the joyful ones. So that I just thought was a fantastic word, Gillian. Thank you so much for suggesting it.
Thank you, Gillian. So we also had a bit of controversy last week, which we don't usually have. So 2 people said that I had been political by saying the published figures for the number of deaths in the United Kingdom with COVID, which had reached the 150,000 mark. But if you remember, the conversation that I was working around was based on the people who provide support services for those who are less fortunate, and how at the start of the COVID outbreak, there was, the clap for the NHS and other support workers. But one of the problems with something of this magnitude is that we're all suffering with a degree of exhaustion, but no one is suffering with the exhaustion of health workers. So that's really, and our respect. So what I was saying, the show's always been based on community. It's always been based on a sort of understanding of how it feels, not just for us, but for everyone. And in fact, when these comments were made, you said, well, hold on, this show started because of COVID.
That's true.
And you wanted to explain the background to how this show started.
So we started this show at the very beginning of COVID. And we did it because we knew that there would be people,
very isolated.
And we wanted to
frightened,
reach out to our community, within this, small community, but it's our, community, our joint community. And so that's why we started the show. So if there was no COVID, there would be no show. Also, Patrick was reporting the astrology around COVID before governments even were talking about it.
There was a Games, it's called the United Services Games, which all the different countries of the world have military people who attend a kind of Olympics. And that happened in the autumn of 2019 in the city of Wuhan. And an awful lot of them got ill. And so that was in the autumn. So from Canadian information I've read, a lot of the athletes went home very, very ill with very COVID-like symptoms. So, we do try. Somebody wrote to one of the correspondents and said Patrick goes out of his way to be absolutely apolitical, and he was making the point about the recorded deaths was 150,000. Now, do I believe that is the number of people who've died directly or indirectly through a lack of healthcare for other conditions, which obviously have been hugely afflicted? And when we have someone very close at the moment who's going through cancer, and fortunately did get to have a scan quite quickly this week, there are some people who haven't had those treatments. So anyway, the early stages of the reporting, we were following this on Channel 4 News, which is a bit more of a robust news service. It doesn't just report what the government tells it, it actually asks quite probing questions. And it was clear the British government were not reporting all the people who died. And of course, the other thing that happened was that some doctors wouldn't go to care homes because they were fearful for their own welfare. So some people who were reported as COVID deaths might not have been. And so what came up for me with both the correspondents on this, and one of them is someone we're extremely fond of, is that it was their relationship to the numbers that get reported. So you were seeing it through your own political prism. I was just reporting on, let's not forget what a substantial amount of people have died and have suffered. And you've said, like with 9/11, 2,996 people have died, but how many more firefighters will die from all the toxins that they breathed in that day early? Probably loads more yet. So, but that became a national event of mourning for it. So the point I was making is, had we as a country really had almost a commemorative moment of thinking, look, that's a huge amount of people. Now, if the numbers are underreported by the government for their own purposes, because we know in China they most certainly have been.
Even if it was 5,000 people, even if it was 1,000 people, that's 1,000 people who aren't on the planet.
That's not politics.
It's not.
That's humanity.
Yeah.
We're talking about humanity. So if your relationship to government figures works through a political prism, I do feel that Laurie was right when she said that was a projection. I have to be truthful about that, because I wasn't talking in a political way. I'm not making any comments on the British leadership or whether people should wear masks or not masks or have inoculations or not, because it's all very much a personal choice. But the point was made that this was not a spiritual debate that we were having. Well, what we're doing is standing up for people who've basically kept going to work without the proper equipment, particularly in the early days. Now, in some cases, are being forced to have inoculations when some people might not want that. So that's not being political. That's just reporting on the impact on the human side of things. Because this show has always been about the humanity. It's about people and it's about caring.
And I think just one more thing I'd like to add about it is that spirituality and astrology aren't separate from life. In fact, there's little point in kind of going into personal development if we don't thread that into our lives somehow, because that's it's a tool. That's why it's there and it can help us. So I don't see them as separate things necessarily. There are going to always be overlaps between doing an oracle or tarot reading and talking about someone's real life situation.
What we should be doing really is bringing the spiritual domain into the practical and political domain all of the time.
Yeah.
There is in fact one Tory MP who believes in astrology, especially medical astrology. Now you might not know that because you might think, well, because it depends on your perspective and your political persuasions, but that actually is true. So I don't feel that was, and I don't feel that was a point that we agreed with, to be honest. So we always try to be caring. We really welcome the comments made. We appreciate they're coming from a good place, and from a point of sincerity. But please understand, it is our show, and we try to be as inclusive as possible to everyone. But there may be some times when you won't agree with us, and you're welcome to say, but please don't tell us what we should do, because that's what happened. Even if the language was a little bit nuanced, it was basically a tell. We wouldn't tell anyone what to do. We don't tell people whether they should have a jab or wear a mask or whatever, because it is down to individual choice. So we try to be very, very democratic, but these shows don't earn us any money, because the money that my channel and Elisa's channel from YouTube generates in terms of advertising revenue is very, very tiny, to be honest. We did the show in the early days daily because we felt people were isolated, and we wanted to provide some different angles. And the daily show was very, very popular. A lot of people mourned it when we decided to end it, but we just couldn't do it anymore. We just didn't have the energy or the time to do it. And of course we've moved and various other things. No, on another note, another very kind contributor, and thank you for all three of the people who did contribute about the political issue, but I'm not saying those numbers are exactly right. I'm just saying those are the published numbers. And I agree that in China, that obviously they're hugely underreported. And isn't it a coincidence that it did start in Wuhan? So there's another thing we could talk about, but we're not getting into the politics. But the other point that was made was about the sound, and someone gave us some lovely advice on that. We do use a muffler on the microphone because we've had the house adapted just before Christmas, and this room that we're in isn't quite finished. We're having the kitchen refitted this week, and we've also got a central heating engineer here tomorrow. So we're in a state of flux, so everything's not quite settled, and we do need to get
our studio at the moment is kind of moving around as we get work done. So once we're settled in one place, then I really hope we can improve the sound.
Yeah, the background looks the same, but actually we've got kitchen worktops in front of us. So that's a hard surfaces, so that creates a bit more echo. So try to muffle it today with a cloth. That was one of the suggestions on the door, but thank you so much for that. So thanks for all your suggestions, and please know that we really appreciate where
and thank you
you're
for hearing
from.
us out as well.
But we just thought we'd take some care to explain where we came from and what the genesis of this show is about. It was always to do with COVID right from the beginning. Now, in terms of the winner of the birthday, well, it's a little bit of a challenge for me, the one I've chosen, because Camilla from Saskatoon in Saskatchewan in Canada wasn't absolutely sure on the time, but she thought it was 9:45 a.m. And so Alyssa's going to be sharing the wheel on the screen. And the wonderful thing about this chart is that you've got Mars in the 10th house in Capricorn. So Mars loves being in Capricorn, it's exalted here. And in the 10th house is very Saturnian and very Capricornian. So that would give you a natural authority. You also have Jupiter on the 10th house. So that elevates your enthusiasm in terms of your interactions with others more publicly. You also have Venus can join in with Jupiter. So the two benefics in astrology, the traditional benefic, the greater benefic is Jupiter, the lesser benefic is Venus. So they're lucky, and they're at 22 degrees, which is a controversial degree in astrology, due to a Serbian astrologer's take on the 22nd degree. But I'll talk to you about that another time. But I would say those two combined planets on the 10th house, very near to the 10th house, is very, very good, along with Mars. You also have a whole raft of other planets in Capricorn, including Mercury and Eros, and both Alyssa and I have Mercury and Eros in Capricorn. And of course you have Saturn there, so it's in its dignity in the 11th house, very Aquarius, which is co-ruled by Saturn. So that's, again, you're someone who's going to be very hardworking, very industrious. And then your sun is just on the cusp. It's on the energetic degree, as it's known in astrology, 29 degrees 38 minutes in Capricorn, so just before Aquarius. So your birthday return is going to coincide with the sun just switching over to Aquarius, and your midpoint between the moon, which is in the lovely diplomatic Libra, is actually 8 degrees in Sagittarius in the 9th house, which of course very Sagittarian. You also have Juno there along with Venus and Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius. So you're very lucky. You have Jupiter and Saturn in dignity, you have Mars exalted, you have Moon in the 7th house, which means I think you're very skillful at relationships. You also have the North Node in a wonderful trine with the Sun and also Eros and Mercury, all in Capricorn. So the way you relate to others, especially groups and friends, I think is extremely effective. And you have Neptune, like me, in Scorpio, but in the 7th house. So this is a lovely, lovely chart. Also, great link between Mars and Pluto, the two co-rulers of Scorpio, traditional Mars, modern higher octave Pluto. And they're in the 6th house, Pluto, linking into Mars in the 10th. So I think work and responsibilities have been an area that you've shone, but I think it's your people skills, and you probably do love travel too. So the big news for you, of course, is that Pluto is conjunct your Mercury, the moving Pluto in the sky, conjunct your Eros, and it's going to be conjunct the Sun in 2023. So that could be some big changes in terms of your future life direction. Now, what about the modalities? What are you going to go for?
Well, this week I thought we'd use the Archangel Gabriel Oracle cards. Gabriel is known to be the angel of communication, to help us with all our communications, help us to all get along, basically.
And the most important thing in communication is often missed is the ability to listen.
Yes, that's
not
true.
tell, and not order, or to listen.
That's
to
right.
know where people are coming from. So that's why we say with the comments we made, we really appreciate them, because we know they all came from a really good place.
No, and we want people to be,
say how they feel.
Say how they feel. That's good. That's very good to have that assertion. Okay, I'd also like to say that it is Patrick's birthday this week, on the 21st.
You sprung that on me.
So, if we could all wish Patrick a very happy birthday.
Well, that's how I just swung in the wedding just before it was a laugh. It was literally just before I was 60.
Yeah, you wanted to get married.
Yeah, I always wanted to get married by the time I was 60.
Yeah.
So, I just did it by a couple of days.
Yeah, a couple of days.
Whoosh.
Sprung. Right, okay, this one was sticking out, and it says, new project. Like a newborn baby, your actions are growing your ideas into reality. So I love this idea that a project can be something that we grow, like this says, like a newborn baby or like a plant. It's something that has to be nurtured. So when we have these new ideas and inspirations, they might not happen straight away. Things take time. It's like that word trajectory that we were talking about earlier. But let's just see where those new ideas take us, because it could be something really creative.
Well, that's lovely, because with the sun moving into the sign of Aquarius, that's very much about the future, because it's governed higher octave modern ruler by Uranus, very future forward, as our wonderful psychic friend in Canada, Mystic Mike, says, future forwards. So a time to emerge a little bit. And if you are lucky enough to be in the southern hemisphere, someone wrote to me this week and said, thank you so much for including the southern hemisphere in your video. Well, that's an absolute pleasure. But we know it's been very hot at times, and obviously we'd love that in Britain.
Yeah, a little bit cold today.
But thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a great week. If you've got a word for the week for week commencing the 24th of January, please share it. If you'd like to enter for the free birthday prize draw, so that's the 24th, I think it's through to the 31st. Maybe the 31st is the Monday, I'm not sure. Maybe the 30th. Please share and you can win. And also any ideas you have, please feel very welcome to share them with us. If you've yet to subscribe to our channel, we'd be honoured if you did. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. And thank you so much to all our patrons too. So, from Mrs. A, it is...
Goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Bye.
Bye.